And when, and when asked to put this together, I was trying to think what would be the best way that I could give some ideas, some tips for people. And I really wanted to center it around some strategies to improve student success. And only as I was putting this together did I realize, and I apologize for those of you who this might bug like it bugs me when I see it, that I put online classroom and then online classroom, back to back in both the title and the subtitle of what I was doing. But hey, that's just me that gets bugged by that type of thing. So I came up with four strategies that I want to talk about today. Each of them easy to implement, things that you can put into your classroom quickly, that you can do without a huge amount of extra work, but that make a big difference for how you reach out to students and how students perceive the classroom that you're in. I'm going to present each of the four strategies and then leave some time for questions and thoughts at the end. So feel free. Vicky is actually going to be monitoring the chat, so if you do have any questions, she can break in if there's something specific on one of the strategies, but otherwise I will ask at the end for anybody with any questions. So I put four strategies together, and I'm going to go through each of these separately, but just so you get them at the start here. One, schedule your announcements. Two, explain the reasons for assignments. Three, create a space for conversation. And four, check in often and respond with encouragement, help, and solutions. And, again, none of these are, life-altering huge things, but they're things that, you may do already. You may do some of these, you may do others not. I want to give you a chance to kind of see what I have done to try and increase student success in my classroom. I'm going to keep this LMS agnostic, so this is not aimed at, telling you here's how to do it in Canvas or Moodle or any of the others that are out there, but just to give you a sense of what goes on. So I'm going to start with scheduling your announcements. One of the things that I have done increasingly over the last decade or so, and now have it so set up that I actually keep a to-do list that I check off every single week to make sure that I'm sending out the announcements as I want them. And I'm assuming a class that is set up on a weekly format. And of course, you can adjust this to whatever you might actually be doing. But I send three announcements out every week on the same day. For me, my week ends on a Sunday, so my announcements go out on a Monday, a Thursday, and a Sunday. So the students always know what that they're going to hear from me, and they know generally what's going to be in each one. So the first announcement every week is, what are we working on this week? And what will be expected of them out of the week. So always laying out so the students know what's going on in the week and they know what they're going to have to do when things are due. If you have multiple due dates during the week, then that's made very clear. If you just have a single end of the week due date, that's made clear. And I like to, at least I use Canvas. I like to actually link all the assignments in the announcement itself so the students can even use that as kind of a checklist type of thing as they're going through, and they can link directly over to the assignment from that announcement. And then in the middle of the week, which for me is the Thursday announcement, I just do what I call a check-in. And it's often the shortest of the announcements that I send, but it really is just a one I send every single week that says, how are things going? Are you having any problems? Are there any issues? Are you running into any, problems completing an assignment, knowing what you need to do, any of that type of stuff, where I ask the students to contact me if they do have that, so that, I'm not waiting until that very last minute right before something is due to make sure that everything is going okay for them. And then at the end of the week, what assignments are due? Again, quite often repeating exactly what I said at the beginning of the week, so they're getting the repetition as they go through. And what are the takeaways from the week? What were we doing? A kind of a recap of what were we doing? What should they have done? What should they have gotten out of it? And again, just a very simple three announcements a week. In fact, what I found, because mine at this point in time is, a fairly set of assignments that I do at the roughly the same time in my classes. And I actually basically copy the announcements out of a previous semester where I've taught the same thing and then adjust the links to the new one and then add in here's how the weather is, or here's what how about that thing that just happened on campus the other day, kind of have that top part that changes. But fundamentally, I'm not recreating this every single semester. I'm actually using the same stuff because the class is formatted and running through in roughly the same manner. And a little secret on that, I actually do usually have a fourth announcement. And this is one that I just send out where I put out a list of everything happening on campus that week, including sports, clubs, activities, lectures, music events, really anything going on campus. Luckily, on my campus, we do have that comes out. We have a calendar that's kept fairly well up to date. And usually the student services or some sort of activity center will send out the list of kind of things that are going on. And I just compile it all together so the students have a sense of what's going on that week, what is available if they want to participate in it. And I also do invite students to tell me of other things going on. If they're in a club that doesn't normally show up on the list that I get, then tell me when your club is meeting. Tell me when you're having an extra thing. About 6 or 8 years ago, the sports wasn't always on the calendar that I did. And I had a basketball player just say, okay, well, here's our schedule so that you can put that on, have that on there every single week whenever you send this out. And I do this both for the students on campus and for the online students to give them a chance to be involved and to give them a sense that there is a community at the community college. There's something that they can be involved in and they can do that. So they do get, double announcements from me on Monday, which, sometimes maybe that's a little much. I don't know. But for me, this has always worked with kind of the Monday, Thursday, Sunday format for announcements. The second strategy I want to talk about is explaining the reasons for assignments. And this comes to me out of a realization that I kind of had as I was teaching more and more online and contrasting it with what I was doing in class, especially when I had very similar assignments that I would do in class versus online. We have a common assignment in my department that everybody does in a History 1301 and 1302 class. So it's being done by traditional classes, hybrid classes, and online classes. And I realized pretty early on in that I was doing a real serious introduction to those assignments in class, taking out time at the beginning of a class period to talk about this stuff, and yet just throwing it out there for my online students and saying, go. Essentially just saying, hey, you can do this surely, without the explanation that for some reason, if you're with me, I'm going to give you all this, and if you're not, good luck, I guess. And so I've really tried to work now with giving an explanation for the assignment. And this can be, what is the assignment? How does it work? Where it fits into the class? What skills you're supposed to learn from it? Anything that I would normally talk to an in-class student about the assignment, I now want to have in there for my online students. And just as a couple of examples, I do sometimes where it's just a heading at the top of each assignment where it just lays out, here's what we're doing, here are the skills we're working on, that type of thing. We in my department have a requirement that every single assignment must be tied back to our learning objectives that we have from the state. And so that's also always at the top of my assignments, is which learning objective that we are working on. And if you're into multimedia, I also do myself a screencast video, or you could do an audio recording of you explaining the exact same things. The advantage to a screencast video is that you can then actually show them what they see on the screen and show them how to submit something, how to complete a part of it, how to access part of it, especially if there's anything that may be a little bit tricky for an online student who may not know exactly where to click for something. You can kind of walk them through the process of it. And I will use these For single assignments, we use McGraw-Hill in our history classes. And so there's things like the Smart Book. I have a screencast video at the beginning of the thing explaining what the Smart Book is, how it works, what the idea of them doing it is, and then show them how to do it, what it actually looks like. But also, I was talking about the common assignment. We have a multi-part scaffolded common assignment that we do. And I actually have a screencast video that walks them through the entire process, all of the steps in a single video, so that they see how they link together. So there's a sense of, that they're not just doing something for the sake of doing something, they're doing something for a reason. And when I do something like that, I try to make it as evergreen as possible. And for those of you who've not heard the term evergreen before, that means make it to where it can be used over the course of multiple semesters without having to remake it each semester. So if you've got the same type of assignments or you have this same thing, make the video in a way that you don't have to re-record it, because there's nothing worse than, every single semester having to re-record every single video. You don't want to be doing that. And like a lot of other things with online classes, this type of thing becomes one of those where it takes a while to set it up at the very beginning, the first time you do it. But then after that, you can largely just let it run without you having to go back in and mess with it at a later point. I don't go quite as far as some people I've heard with evergreen assignments, where they actually will talk about, I don't make reference to the weather that day because then it may not be relevant for later or something like that. I instead usually start off the videos saying, I'm making this video in spring semester of 2024. I'm using my History 1301 classroom as the example, but these things will vary depending on what it is later where you are. But the assignment is the exact same. So that's the way that I kind of allow some personalization, allow me to kind of talk about some of the more personalized things that make it a little bit more of a chatty video rather than just a here's what you do video, without making it something that I would have to redo every semester. So that's my second strategy in looking at this. So I've talked about scheduling your announcements, and I've talked about explaining the reason for assignments. Now, the third thing that I want to talk about here is creating a space for conversation. This is probably the strategy of all four of these that is going to depend more on you than anything else. And it really comes to what sort of persona you want to put forward in your classroom as to how much you want to do something along the lines of creating a space for conversation in the classroom. I tend to want to have a lot of space for conversation, both in my in-person classes and in my online classes. And I want to have a space for the students to be able to interact with me outside of just turning something in, but also interacting with each other, given the chance, so that they don't feel like a lot of online students do, that they are isolated wherever they are, that they are just this isolated person taking this class, that they are instead involved in a community. So, since they often do feel isolated, and we can even feel isolated in teaching as well, because a lot of times if you're teaching an online class, sometimes it feels like you're sending information out without knowing if anyone is receiving it. It can feel sometimes whenever you write that fourth response to somebody, I answered that in the announcement that I sent and you haven't read it. It can feel like you're sending all this stuff out to students and you have no idea what they're getting back out of it. And when you get assignments that come in that aren't what they're supposed to be or aren't filling the things you want, it can really feel frustrating at times. And so I've really tried to create more and more spaces for conversation, where I can get a sense of who the students are, they can get a sense of who I am. And I've found that the more of that space of conversation that I make, the more I find out from them what the trouble points are, where the problems are, why they're not responding to something, or why I'm not getting the assignment back in the way that I'm expecting it to without me having to go and drag it out of them, with these very pointed things that I have to send. So what might this look like? I've used three different formats for this over the years. The first one I have there is a student forum set up for students to interact with each other in the classroom. I say that, and that didn't work for me. I mean, it's an idea, and maybe it'll work for you. I tried it and I tried to promote it and never really found a whole lot of success with it. I think one year I had a class that really dove into it and they actually used it a lot. And almost every other one, it really never worked for me. But I have heard it being used by other people successfully, so I don't know if there's maybe a marketing side for me of how did or did not do it at that point in time. But I wanted to put it out as a possibility. I mean, it is the one that requires the least work for you at all in that. I mean, just put a student forum and say, here, go and talk to each other. But like so many other things, if there's not an incentive for them to do it, and they're not seeing that they're going to get anything out of it, then for most students, that becomes something that's just there that they don't have to work with. So the two that I do currently use, the first is I'm going to say something, and I don't mean this to be offensive in any way to those of you teaching online, and I'm not criticizing how you do it at all, but I get really tired of the discussion forums that are answer this question, post once, respond to two other people, because to me, that just ends up with a repetitive forum where it might as well just be a short answer question rather than actually a real discussion that goes on. And I have turned to open-ended discussion forums where I teach history, and what I do is I just have two discussion forums open, one for the first half of the semester, one for the second half of the semester, with requirements that they post a certain number of times over the course of the semester in it, with higher points on the grading rubric for doing it on kind of a regular basis rather than putting it all off until the end, which some students still will. But I make it an open-ended forum where I tell them you can talk about anything to do with the history that we are discussing, whether it's something that you found in the textbook, in the lectures, that's fine. I have a whole series of what I call optional additional resources, which is just interesting podcasts, documentaries, Smithsonian pages, things like that of history topics that they can engage with. Or as I tell them, something that comes up in your own life that's related to the history, you are welcome to talk about it. And that has really been, I've started doing that about 5 or 6 years ago, and it's really been a game changer for me in my online classroom because it becomes a much more freewheeling conversation. And it really does mean that I am learning a lot more from them also of what they're interested in beyond just the question that I want answered. And I don't post anything up originally in there because I want this to be student driven, although I do go in and respond to what students do, but I don't make any original posts because I found if I do, they see that as here, I must respond to that one because they're used to that's what you do. You respond to what the professor says. And so I have moved to these open-ended discussions, and they go who knows where every semester. Every single semester is different. Every single semester, there are different things that students talk about. What the students bring into it is different. I have, and I'm not going to give any students' names, obviously, in this, but I have a student this semester who privately told me that she is just coming off of 13 years of addiction to meth and fentanyl and stuff like that. And now we're doing the second half of American history, and they're talking about in our textbook, they're talking about kind of the problems of opium and drugs in the late 19th century to the early 20th century. And she wrote a whole thing about that has really generated a lot of conversation as she's related what happened to those people in the past to kind of what she went through. And it's been a really fascinating back and forth on that. And I will get these threads that end up 15, 18, 20 responses deep as students go back and forth on these things. Now, I won't say it's magical, some of it just ends up being students posting things and there's nothing a whole lot there, as we might expect out of a discussion forum. But it really has opened it up in a way that I haven't seen in a lot of other of my attempts to get discussion going. And so it's a conversational place as much as it is a formal discussion forum for the students. The other place that I open up for conversation for my students is a one-on-one assignment. I do student self-reflection, and I have a self-reflection of this for the students to turn in every single week. They must send every Sunday, they post a self-reflection. And I actually presented on this 2 years ago at the TCCTA conference on using sort of student self-reflection in the classroom. And I will probably redo that at some point in time in a future conference just to come back in and, with new audience and talk about it again. But I have the students in these self-reflections reflect on what did they work on in the last week, which gets them to kind of that metacognition. What did you actually do? How did you work? How did that go? What work did you do? And then make a plan for what they're going to do in the next week. So get them into this idea that they are planning their work, that they are seeing both what they have done or not done, because sometimes the answer is they didn't do a whole lot in the previous week. What have they done and what do they have coming up for them? So I always open up the self-reflection with those questions. I throw in some questions in the middle of just something about, where are we in the class? What's going on? I ask all sorts of questions in the middle. But then the last question, which is really the place that I mean for the creating a space for conversation, I do essentially what might be considered a journal prompt of, hey, you can talk about anything here. Whatever you want to talk about, and I tell them I will read it. I will not judge you on anything that you put there, and I will respond if it's something that invites a response. And I've gotten fascinating things out of this over the course of the last couple of years that I've been doing this. Now, the majority of students don't say a whole lot, but I will hear about all sorts of things. I'll hear about their struggles in my class and in other classes. I'll hear about their problems. I'll hear about their successes. I hear about birthdays. I hear about concerts that they go to. I hear about tragedies that have happened in their family. I hear about all of these different things in a way that I don't even hear usually from my face-to-face students, because if I'm chatting with them in class, they know they're seeing they're being seen by the audience around them, whereas this is very much just a one-on-one thing. And I will say that I've recommended counseling for a lot of students based upon what they post in there. I have I hate to say that this happened, but I did have a student right at the beginning of the pandemic who wrote in one of those right after the pandemic had started. This would be April, right in April, wrote and said, if I don't respond next week, that means I committed suicide over the last week. And don't worry, she didn't, but I sent out the student health check at that point in time because this student was comfortable enough to tell me something like that. And I'm like, I, sent the student health check. They checked on her. Everything turned out okay. But, you find out things like this. I also, back when we had the CARES Act funding, I actually triggered a whole bunch of CARES Act funding going to my students based upon what they talked about in that space of, they can't make rent because they're not working at a job anymore. They're going to lose their car because they can't make their car payment. They're not sure where they're going to have enough food to survive, for the next week or two. I'd got a lot of that triggered in. But as I said, I also hear a lot of success. I hear a lot of, hey, I did really well on that math test I was so worried about when I wrote you last week. And it ends up being these conversations that go on and on over the course of the semester where we can refer back and forth, and I can, I sometimes will find out how long and involved the job process is for students as they're looking for jobs and doing interviews and then finally getting that job and showing up on the first day. And they'll give, I even will sometimes upload pictures to it of like them at their first job or something like that. And so that can be really successful. I also, for those students that disappear, and we all have those students that just disappear, they stop coming, they stop turning stuff in. If they have been involved in those open-ended questions, the self-reflections before, I can often tell why. What I can see the things building up over time that have led to them, coming to that point where they disappear, or they'll explain to me why they, beyond just, hey, I got the form to fill out for a drop. They will actually explain why in that space, because they'll tell me, hey, I'm going to have to drop this class because of X, Y, and Z or whatever. So it really has given me a look into the students' lives and have them have a way to respond back to me about things. And I'm not saying this to brag in any way, but I will say that the one of the things I hear the most often from the students that do engage me a lot in this is that they say that it's an image that I really do care about them, that I actually do care to hear things, especially when I also respond back to them, that they feel like that it's not just a faceless, nameless class, but that I actually, somebody cares. And they often will say that, hey, it's the first time I've ever had that real feeling that comes out of this. And this is something that we have seen. We have a Weatherford College learning community where we read books and stuff and about pedagogy and teaching and learning. And there are a lot of studies out there that say that students end up graduating from college. And when asked, did you ever have a teacher that you felt really cared about you or really took investment in your life? And sadly, it's not a gargantuan percentage of students who say that they have felt that over the time that they've been in college. So if I can provide that, by creating a space for conversation with them, it's something that's small but big. It's a small thing to do, but it's also a big thing to do. And yeah, it takes more time than just, grading the assignments, but for me, it's a very rewarding time to be able to go back and forth with students and hear about them.
Well, do you mind if I stop you for a second? We just have a few questions in chat that I thought
Absolutely.
maybe you could quickly respond to.
Absolutely.
Do you have remote office hours as well?
We have gone back and forth with that at Weatherford College as to whether it was allowed or not allowed, or sometimes allowed and sometimes not, and sometimes we're told we can from up above, and sometimes we're told it's up to our department if we can or not. We have gotten very mixed messaging about that, and one of my previous department chairs pretty much came to the conclusion that we should not have online office hours. And so that we have kind of end up stuck in that model for the most part. I have found that when I've had online office hours, when I have done it, I usually do it like if my assignments are due on a Sunday night, I'll do it on a Sunday evening when I have the office hours. And I get way less students ever coming to that than I get hearing back from, things like this. In fact, well, I mean, I can often feel like that in my normal office hours of just sitting there doing my own thing and students not coming by. And it can feel the same way, which I always like the Sunday night office hours better in the fall because at least I can watch Sunday night football on my TV while when not a single student is there. Although I will say one semester when one student figured out that's what I was doing, he showed up and we talked about football every single week from that point forward. But I haven't had a whole lot of success with that, but I also am not sure, I don't know really how to market it in a way to get students there because I've tried a bunch of different things without a whole lot of success.
For your
So
weekly reflections, are those graded assignments?
I grade them on completion. If they submit it, it's a full 100 on the grade in the grade book, and it's a small percentage. It's a 5% of the overall grade over the course of the semester. So I do have it as a graded assignment, but it doesn't, I don't penalize them for what they say or anything in that. And that's also allowed. I think that makes it easier for students to open up about things because they don't feel like, oh, I'm going to be judged by grade if I do or do not. In fact, my commitment is that every between Monday to Tuesday, I read the ones that I got the last Sunday. And I actually have well, I use a program called Text Expander, but it's essentially a cut and paste thing that I stick in there that says, thank you for submitting. uh, this is as much for you as it is for me, and I will read everything that you post here, but I will only respond back if there's something that I feel I can respond to. Otherwise, you will just get this message. And a lot of times I'm just putting 100 and I'm putting that message in there, and that's the end point for it. But
Finally,
sometimes I'm also writing several paragraphs in response to somebody, to what they do. Although I found that, and you probably have experienced this as well in your own classes, there's a lot of the same questions that get asked. And so I actually do have quite a few of those cut and paste things in there. Like I now have a cut and paste for, hey, we have counseling and it's available. If you should want to see counseling, you send an email to this and it's free as part of your fees. And I have I hear about time management as something that students struggle with a lot. And so I have a cut and paste thing that I just put in if they've mentioned anything about struggling with time management. I say, here are some strategies to think about. Here are some things that you can try. So it's kind of, again, like so many of these other things that we do in online classes, it's got a pretty decent setup time of getting all this stuff going, but now it really does run very smoothly over the course of a semester in responding to students and all that. And yes, if you grade it, they do it. If you don't grade it, they don't do it. There is that part of it as well. So yes, I do have it graded.
and finally, last question, we can move on. I'm sorry to hold you up, but would
No,
you
you're
be
fine.
willing to share the instructions for an open-ended discussion? Somebody said that they think it sounds like a great way to engage students with the material and teaches history as well. So if you could provide that to me, I could include that with the materials for this.
Absolutely. Or even, if we, depending on how long number 4 takes me here, I could even pop into my online classroom and just show it on the screen here as well. I don't mind doing that. So,
Thank you
but
so
yeah, I will
much.
definitely send it to you to be as part of this also. So no problem with that.
Thank you.
All right. So the final thing, and this really follows from these first 3, which is why I kind of was like, do I want to have this number 4 in here or not? Because it very much follows from the first 3, but I still thought it was important to have it separated out, which is check in often. The announcements, creating a space for conversation is a place to check in often, and respond with encouragement, help, and solutions. I struggle with this, or have in the past, because I'm really sarcastic. And that doesn't always come through incredibly well for students. And so I've had to really kind of have this mindset in my head that I need to be thinking about encouragement, help, and solutions, and not respond with a pithy remark, or not say, well, it's in the syllabus. How could you not have known it was there? Or I posted in the announcement. How could you not have known? That's my general tendency. The first thing that goes through my head when I get one of those emails of, well, how do I do this thing? I've told you 15 times here, here, and here. How can you not have done it? And I just had that thought one time a couple of years ago, like, if I was a student who received that from a professor, I would never reach out to that professor again. I'd be like, they just basically slapped me in the face and said, hey, you're stupid. You didn't do what you're supposed to do. And I would never want to reach out to that professor again. In fact, I might not want to really speak up in that class again if I, felt like that was coming to me.
Hey,
So I
Scott,
tried to bring,
I think we're
yeah.
paid to be patient.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And so I've tried to change over that mindset, which again means I think those things. That's where I start. I think those things. And then I say, okay, now stop and now respond with encouragement, help, and solutions. So as I said, this can come from the check-in announcements. This can come from the self-reflection side of things where you are encouraging, helping, offering solutions, letting them know where they are, or a couple of other things you can try. You can do a mid-semester survey of how is the class going, and you can even make it an anonymous survey so that they feel like they've got some sort of that freedom to be able to respond honestly about how things are going. Now, you have students who don't believe anything can be anonymous, and so there will be some students you won't hear anything from. It's real, but something like that where you can kind of here's what's going well, here's what's not going well. And when I've done that, I then actually do an announcement post the next week saying, hey, here's what you said, so they know that I'm listening to it. And if there are things that I can implement in the middle of the semester that might improve things, then I tell them, hey, and based on your suggestions, I have done X, X, and X. So they feel like it's part of an ongoing conversation. Another place that can be a real problem is with assignments, the grading of assignments and the comments that we put back on assignments, where it can often feel like they never read the comments that we put on assignments. And so one of the ways I do it in my weekly self-reflections is anytime after I have given back an assignment that's submitted and graded, I have a question in those reflections of, did you get the grade you expected to get? Did you understand the comments that you got back from me on, just so that I can get some feedback from them and they can talk about what they've gotten? And you can even consider something like an exam wrapper, which, if you've never heard of what that is, an exam wrapper is an assignment that goes essentially around an exam or assignment of some sort, where before the assignment, you have the students talk about what they've done to prepare to do that assignment. So they have a thing they submit prior to saying, here's what I've done to prepare. They do the assignment, and then afterwards they talk about how their preparation helped them with whatever they did in the assignment. And you can also have it even a little bit past that, of once they get the comments back on it, then they have to respond to your comments. They have to respond to the grade and the comments of that. And so you can have that. I've never gone that detailed into it, but I've read about them. And that would, of course, also have to be a graded assignment of some sort if you wanted to. It could either be an extra credit on top of the assignment or a small graded assignment as well. Just getting the students to have a place to check back and forth with how they're doing in the class, so you can check in often with them. You can, and this is something that I do very regularly in the semesters, have your students, I do this at about the midpoint. I have the students in those self-reflections give advice to themselves earlier in the semester. So let's say it's week 10. I say, go back now and tell your week 1 self what you would do differently, to you have greater success in the class or greater success in your other classes or whatever it might be. What would you tell your past self in order to improve your performance in this class? And I will then send those anonymously back out to the whole class, because everybody has submitted one through the self-reflection. I send them anonymously back out to the whole class so that they can see, for one thing, that they all say very similar stuff. You know, I would devote more time to reading. I would devote more time to doing the assignments. I would study hard. Any of these things, and so they can see that they're not alone in this. They're not the only ones out there doing it. And a lot of times I will respond inside those, when they post them, I will respond with the parts of this, the help and solutions part. I'll respond with the help and solutions. That's quite often where the time management thing gets punched in, because like 60 to 80% of students, it's time management fundamentally that they say they would do better at, as they give the advice. I've always thought that I might give those advices at the beginning of a new semester to a new set of students, but I've yet to actually follow through with that, because sometimes I feel you do have to kind of be in the class a little bit before that advice helps you. So I haven't quite gone as far as that to use those the next semester, but I've considered it. And then lastly, give your own end of semester course evaluation. Most of you probably have an official course evaluation that your college does. Do one for yourself. Do one for your students to have them evaluate the course. I do something where I say, what worked well for you in this course? What did you struggle with in this course? What assignment do you feel did the best at, whatever I'm having them do in the class? What assignment didn't work for you? If there's something else, another type of assignment, what type of assignment would you do? Is there a piece of the class that you would take out if it didn't, if you didn't have to do it? Not that I have to follow up on that, because I usually have all my assignments for a reason, but it's interesting to see what they think about that stuff. And I read those usually, and I tell them I'm not going to read them until after I've submitted grades. I tell them that type that, I just kind of run through them really quickly and give them the grade at the end and say, I'm going to go back in and dive and look at the suggestions you've made after I put the grades in. So don't feel like this is going to affect your grade if you say, I really hated this class, or something along that line. But when I have made changes, I've also made it very clear to the future classes because, of course, this is coming end of semester. There's no change that I can make to them. But if I've made changes based upon these in future semesters, I will often tell those later semester classes that, hey, this comes from responses from students, why I'm doing this now, so that they can see that I am responsive to the advice and the suggestions and the evaluations that they give so that they feel comfortable doing that at a later point as well. All right. I've talked a lot here, and I'm sorry I do talk fast when I get going on these things, so I hope I, haven't skipped over anything, but I'm very open for questions, thoughts, anything else that you have. So please, Vicky, if there's been things in the chat or if anybody wants to unmute themselves and say something, that's perfectly fine.
I think we have a lot of interest around the student interaction forums. So
Yeah.
somebody actually asked for specifics. How do you, what tool do you use for the student interaction forums?
Okay, like the open-ended discussions or the reflections.
Uh,
I guess it could be
Either or
either
both
one.
would be great.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna do the switching over. I'm gonna open it up in the back here and then I'll switch my screen share to it. But I just want to make sure that when I have it opened up here that I'm in the actual classroom for you. And then I'm gonna put it in student mode so you don't see all the names and grades and all that type of stuff as well in it. So give me just a second to set that up here. Just always want to be mindful that I'm not showing anything that shouldn't be shown or anything like that. So is there another question while I'm getting this going?
Would anyone like to say anything while he is? We had a really good discussion about, actually, somebody brought up using Teams to allow people to text questions, so especially for dual credit students. So Tara pointed out that she has a pretty decent response when when she creates opportunities for students to text things. And so she uses Teams and has a link on periodically throughout her LMS so that the students can just click the link, and in Teams you could chat or you could actually come into a meeting. So that seems to be a great tip to get interaction and conversation going as well.
Excellent. Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds absolutely great. That is something that I said I would like to do more of myself, but haven't had a whole lot of, you know, try and not throw too many new things in each semester. So that's kind of been sitting on my list of, yes, I'd love to do that, but haven't done it yet. All right.
There's also apparently the opportunity for Blackboard Collaborate, which uses both audio discussions and text communication. So I guess if we're not a Teams-based campus, Blackboard Collaborate would do the same sorts of things.
Okay. Excellent. All right. I've switched over here. Can y'all see my Canvas page here with discussion forum on it?
Yes.
Yes, ignore the fact that I have like 50 tabs open up there. So, I didn't clear that part out. At least, so I've got a, open-ended discussion forum. This is my current active classroom right now. So that's why I've got in student view and all that, because it is my current active classroom. It's due on March 10th and it spans about 6 weeks or so. But I put in a to-do date every week so that it's on the student's calendar every single week. So I just go every Sunday and update that. So the way I put it is the purpose of discussion is for further discussion on the course material. I'm asking to discuss the material working with in class, and then I tell them what is covered in it. It's an open-ended forum. I try not to give a whole lot more than that, but I do give them some possible prompts that they could think about for posting. I was reading the textbook lecture, and this was something I did not know anything about. I found interesting. In the lecture/textbook, it says blank. I don't know what that means. I think it means this, but I'm not sure. What do you think it means? As we look at this event in history, it reminded me of something going on today. I found this piece of history really interesting. Where might I find more information on it? How do we know this piece of history we're studying is correct/true? What information is it based on? What might we not know? And as I said to the students, that's just some ideas, and they can go any further with that they want to. And I do have, as I said, I've got a screencast video showing them how to do a discussion forum. So I've got that recorded and it's put right there for students who may never have used one before. And then I've got the grading rubric there so the students know how they are going to be graded on this. So I grade on what I call timeliness, which is where I get into, do you post the right number of times? Do you post, as I said, the highest comes from posting the beginning, middle, and end parts of the discussion, so they're active all the way through and not just submitting at the end. I do posting. I try and get them so they're doing a mix of both original posts and responses to each other. Originality comes that they are posting original content. And yes, I was doing this even before AI, so I don't want them just cutting and pasting things and putting in there. I want to hear their own voices about stuff. The quality, which is really centered around keeping the discussion engaging and educational, using the material from multiple class sources. So that's my top grade for that. The discussion quality is that they are doing an ongoing discussion, participating over multiple days and responding to those who have responded to them. And then just writing style that it makes sense. What they're saying makes sense. So and that's all laid out for them ahead of time, that they have those pieces. They know how it's going to be graded. They know what the expectations are. Again, I walk them through all those expectations in the screencast video as well, which is just me, basically doing what I'm telling you right now. In the student view, I'm just, I'm doing the equivalent of a screencast video. And then when we come into it, I then have, this is the discussion forum that we're in. And then I have the, how do you do it? To post original content, do this. To respond to somebody else's, do this. I say, I'm active in the forums but I don't respond to everything. And it's okay if I don't. And that sometimes when I respond, that stops conversation and I don't want that to. So please keep doing it. And then I tell them posting 10 times and so on. And finally, I added this one very recently. I encourage you to look at what others have posted first before you post your own thoughts. Otherwise, we end up repeating information because they sometimes still get very repetitive. And this is actually the way my course is set up. This is they do an intro 2 weeks, and we're now getting into the unit 2, which is where the actual history starts. So we really are only about a week and a half into this thing that's going to go to March 10th. And I've already got 48 posts sitting in this forum, and there are 60 students in the class. So this is a combined section, 2 sections combined. And I've got, as of a week and a half into them having this discussion forum open, 48 in there. And I will say I was checking my forums right before I got into this, and I can see in my own, not in student view, how many are new versus how many I've looked at before. And there were 17 that came in overnight. So, I mean, my students have been very active in this. Unfortunately, to show you the rest of it, I have to show you student names and all that. So I can't really show you what it looks like in there. And because I hesitate to do that. But just letting you know, this format has really worked for me. And as I said, I'll send out the stuff to Vicky on, because I know I'm showing this really quickly on the screen, and I'll cut and paste these things out and send it kind of in a document to Vicky so that she can have that to give to other people. And then we're talking about the weekly reflections. Because I'm in student mode, I can only show you the current one, because the other ones, I open them on Wednesday of every week and close them on Sunday, because these are assignments I don't want them working ahead on, because it's supposed to be a weekly reflection. So this one is the one that happens to be open now because we're between Wednesday and Sunday. So it's the third weekly reflection. And these are those 2 questions that I ask every time. What did you do in class last week? How does that match up with what you said the previous week you were going to do? And what do you think you can improve on with that? And then when you look ahead, what do you have to do next week in the class? What do you plan to work on? When are you going to make time for those things? those questions are repeated every single week, and I always refer back to it the previous time, so they have this link, they can go back to it and see what they said last time and see if it matches up. And that's the metacognition, the teaching them how to think about their learning in ways that they probably haven't thought about their learning before. And then these questions are always something a little bit different. In this case, I've asked them this time, do you have any questions about the course or anything going on at the college? Just a very broad sense, because again, we're in week 3 of the semester. So it's a very broad sense of what's going on. How are things going with them? And then I do the reminder here, which I've sent in that first announcement of the week and will send again in the last announcement of the week. Here's what you should be working on. So they have that. And then I ask them, you know, are you staying on track so far, or are you behind at this point? So getting them to think about, are they where they should be? And then this is that last question. Lastly, is there anything else you want to tell me, either about yourself, about the class, or about something interesting in your life? This last question is your free space to write whatever you want to. If you do not want to write anything, that is fine, but I wanted to give everyone some space each week to write whatever they want with no judgment on my part. I will read it, but that is all unless you ask me for advice or have questions. And so it said questions 1, 2, and 5 are always the same. That's every single week. And then I change around what's in the middle questions. Sometimes, that's where I'll do the give yourself advice from earlier in the semester, or I'll ask them, you just had a unit closed and you got these assignments back with comments. Do you have any questions about them? Any of that type of stuff ends up there. So that's my show and tell time. Any
I love
responses or
this.
questions from that?
Does anybody want to say anything? Eric?
Oh, I was just going to just say that I really appreciate your wanting to have the feedback at the end of your semesters and so on, to have your own personal evaluation. I know that's helped me so much.
Yeah, I didn't used to, but I'd never found that I got what I wanted out of the official end of course evaluation, which ends up being a lot of numbers, a lot of case that doesn't really tell you a whole lot. And so I used to do it for my face-to-face classes. That would be one of the last things I did. I just hand out a piece of paper, say, do not put your name on this, just write
I
it and
did the
turn it
exact
in.
same thing, little cards.
Yep.
And I always tell them, what is it? A person once said, was it feedback is the breakfast of champions?
Yep. And I even had them, like when we used to do, because now all of our evaluations are online. But I remember back, when you used to have like a student would have to come in and do your evaluations, then put it in a sealed envelope and take it somewhere. I do that with the ones there to make sure that they know I'm not going to look at these, until after grades. If there is a way that I could tell something from handwriting or from something that they said, I seal it up and take it away and look at it later so that they can feel confident that they're going to be able to, tell me something true of what's going on. Well, and what do we have? 6 minutes left. I actually wanted to throw out there, I've given you a lot of ideas here. I'm curious if anybody has any other things that they do, tips to kind of work with improving student success in their own classrooms, things that maybe I haven't talked about, or things that you do that you really like, because I'm not going to tell you I have all the answers. So, anybody else have anything they do?
Catherine?
Hi there. I just want to first say thank you. This was great. And I think as instructors, we feel really vulnerable when we show our own classes or our ideas because we feel like we're going to be judged. But I think I can speak for everyone. We're not judging. You were excited to get new ideas. And something that's been really great for me with my online students is like you, like many of you, I'm sure, I schedule things way out in advance so that I can get most of everything set up ahead of time. And I do a weekly video explaining what's happening that week, what we're going to be doing. And in there, I always do an Easter egg so that if somebody watches it, there will be a bonus points. Like at the end, I'll say, okay, you stuck with me through this boring video. Now here's a way to earn some bonus points. And I've found, and I actually tracked it the first semester I did it, I've found that the students who participate in those, and it's measly bonus points. Like if they were really to look at how it affects their grade, it barely does. But those students end up being more successful just because they're more engaged. And so that was just an idea. But thank you again. This was really great. And it's Friday, everybody. We made it.
Yes. It is Friday. It is great. Yes. And um yeah, I have not done that in the past. Oh, actually, no, I did one semester where I really tried to do those videos, and I just, for some reason, I didn't have it on my to-do list in the same way, and I guess it fell off because I made it through like the first 8 weeks, and then I didn't do it after that. And but I like that idea, especially the idea of the Easter eggs, to get people going on that. So yeah, and it's Friday, and I will give away my music preferences. I'm here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and I'm going to go see Tool in concert tonight over in Dallas. So that's my excitement for the weekend here. So anybody else?
Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. I will send an email with your professional development certificate. The video and all the additional information will be posted on the community page as well as on our Facebook. And then you can always reach out to me directly too if you just want it sent directly to you. So I appreciate although it's hard to email a video, so don't ask for that. But I appreciate everybody who showed up today. I appreciate you, Scott. This was absolutely fabulous, and ideas that I hadn't honestly even thought of. So just really great, awesome, inspiring new ideas. So thank you all. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Stay dry, and we'll see you back here. Well, we'll see you at convention is when we're going to see you next.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Good
Scott.
luck with the rest of the semester. Enjoy. I hope the rest of the semester goes well for all of you.
Thank you, Scott.
That was a
Yay,
lot of
it's
fun.
going on.
Yay.
I feel like I don't get to see you anymore. Will you be at convention? You will, right?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Excellent.
When it's in Frisco, I am there. When it's in Houston,
Yes.
it's a little iffy, but Frisco,
No.
yes.
I'm coming to Weatherford College to tell your president, you better let him come to Houston for my year. So, all right. Well, I'll see y'all soon. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank
So
you.
grateful. You were spectacular. I was just some of those ideas were just things that never had crossed my mind. So just
Well,
really smart.
I'm glad. I'm glad it was useful, helpful, and new ideas for people. You never know with things like this if you're going to be like, because you could just be telling people everything they already know. But I'm glad that it came out that way. So that's excellent.
It was great.
Well, I will send the stuff about the discussion forums to you pretty soon after this. So I'm just going to go in and kind of copy and paste this stuff out so that you can have something for anybody who does follow up with you. Otherwise, it was good seeing you, and I will see you at convention.
Thank you.